Issues regarding the Mesbuk. 310. The Mesbuk is one who joins the Imam after one rak'ah has been performed. Even if he joins the Imam during the final sitting, he is still considered a Mesbuk. The following issues arise regarding the Mesbuk. 311. In the rak'ahs he will make up, the Mesbuk is considered to be praying alone. Example, if someone joins the Imam during the second rak'ah of the morning prayer, they are considered a latecomer. After reciting the tekbir, they remain silent. During the final sitting with the Imam, they recite only the tahiyyat. When the Imam gives the salam, they stand up and begin to pray the first rak'ah. They had not prayed with the Imam. After SUBHANEKE and EÚZÜ-BESMELE, he recites Surah Al-FATIHA and a portion of the Holy Qur'an. He proceeds to RUKU and SUJUD as is customary. Then he sits down, recites the Tahiyyat, Salawat, and Rabbena Atina, and gives the salam. One who follows the Imam in the second rak'ah of the evening prayer also proceeds in this manner for the first rak'ah. 312. If a latecomer joins the Imam in the final rak'ah of the evening prayer, he recites the Subhaneke and, performing that rak'ah with the Imam, sits for the Tashahhud. After the Imam gives the salam, he stands up, recites the Subhaneke, EÚZÜ-BESMELE, FATHIHA, and a portion of the Holy Qur'an. After the RUKU and prostrations, he sits down and recites only the Tahiyyat. Then saying ALLAHÜ EKBER, he stands up, recites only the Bismillah, the FATHIHA, and a portion of the Holy Qur'an, and performs the RUKU and prostrations. Then he performs the final sitting and concludes the prayer with the salam. In this way, he is set for the Tashahhud 3 times. However, if the one joining the prayer, Mesbuk, fails to sit for the Tashahhud at the end of the second rak'ah by mistake, he does not need to perform the prostration of forgetfulness. This is because, in a sense, this rak'ah takes the place of the first rak'ah. 313. If the latecomer joins the Imam during the fourth rak'ah of a four-rak'ah prayer, he stands up after sitting for the Tashahhud with the Imam, recites the Subhaneke, the AUZU-BISMILLAH, the FATHIHA, and a portion of the Qur'an. He sits after the RUKU and prostrations. He recites only the Tahiyyat. Then he stands up, recites the FATHIHA with the Basmala, and a portion of the Qur'an. Then he goes into RUKU and prostration, standing up without sitting. He performs one more rak'ah with only the Basmala and the FATHIHA, then takes his final seat. He recites the Tahiyyat, the Salawat, and Rabbena Atina, gives the salam, and completes his prayer. 314. If a latecomer joins the Imam starting from the third rak'ah of a four-rak'ah prayer, he recites only the Tahiyyat during the final sitting along with the Imam. After the Imam gives the salam, he stands up, recites the Subhaneke, the EÚZÜ-BESMELE, the FATHIHA, and a little more of the Qur'an. He goes into RUKU and SUJUD, then stands up and recites only the FATHIHA with the Besmele. He recites a little more of the Noble Qur'an. He goes into RUKU and SUJUD again. He sits for the Tashahhud. He completes his prayer with the salutation by reciting the Tashahhud, the Salawat, and the Rabbena Atina. 315. If a latecomer joins the Imam during the second rak'ah of a four-rak'ah prayer, he has prayed 3 rak'ahs with the Imam. After the Tashahhud, when the Imam gives the salam, he stands up. He recites the Subhaneke, the AUZU-BISMILLAH, the Basmala, the FATHIHA, and the additional verses he intends to recite. He performs the RUKU and prostrations, then sits for the final sitting. He gives the salam and completes his prayer. 316. When the Imam is in RUKU, anyone following the Imam has joined the rak'ah associated with that RUKU. However, if someone finds the Imam in SUJUD and immediately goes into SUJUD, they have not joined the rak'ah of that SUJUD. For this reason, they must make up that rak'ah as described above. 317. The one who joins the prayer, Mesbuk, stands up by saying ALLAHÜ EKBER after the Imam is given the salam and completes. The missing rak'ah letters HS, IT is not appropriate for the one who joined late to stand up and begin praying the missing rak'ahs before the Imam gives the salam However, you may stand up before the Imam's salam due to excuses such as the prayer time being about to end or the need to pass in front of people. However, if the Imam has not yet concluded the prayer with the salam, the one who joined late must remain seated for the duration of the Imam's Tashahhud. Standing up before this is not permissible. 318. If the follower stands up and recites the Qur'an before the Imam has completed the Tashahhud, it is not valid. Therefore, if the latecomer stands up to make up the first or second rak'ah and recites the Qur'an, and after the Imam has finished the Tashahhud, to the extent that the prayer becomes valid, the prayer is valid. However, if he recites so little that the prayer becomes invalid, his prayer is not valid. 319. It is not valid for the late joiner to follow another person in the rak'ahs he is making up, nor for another person to follow the late joiner in this situation, the one who joins. The prayer is not considered to be praying alone in this situation. However, if a late joiner forgets how many rak'ahs he must make up and considers only how many rak'ahs the person joining with him must make up, this does not invalidate his prayer. 320. If a person who has missed part of a prayer intends to start over by reciting the opening takbir, they will have invalidated the prayer they began with the previous takbir. This is not the case for someone praying alone, unless they intend to perform another prayer. The takbir they recite with the intention of resuming the same prayer does not invalidate it, because for one who prays alone, both prayers are the same. As for the one who joins the congregation Mesbuk, in one sense he is like one who prays alone, but in another sense, since he follows the Imam, it is not the same prayer for him. 321. According to Imam al-Azam, the latecomer recites the tashriq takbirs along with the Imam during Eid al-Adha, then stands up and completes the remaining rak'ahs. However, according to Imam Azam, one who prays alone is not obliged to recite these takbirs. For this reason, the one who joins the congregation is not in the position of one praying alone, but rather in the position of a follower, muqtadi, of the Imam. 322. If the latecomer stands up at a time when standing is valid and completes his prayer before the Imam gives the salam, then follows the Imam in the salam, his prayer is not invalidated. 323. If the latecomer has finished reciting the Tashahhud before the Imam has given the salam, according to one opinion, they repeat the Shahada, and according to another opinion, they remain silent. The correct practice here is for the late joiner to recite the Tahiyyat slowly. A follower who has finished the Tahiyyat before the Imam during the first sitting also remains silent and does not participate in the Tahiyyat. 324. When following the Imam in prayers recited aloud, Sarin, the latecomer does not recite the Subhaneke. He recites it when he stands up to make up the remaining rak'ahs. This is the correct practice. This was mentioned earlier. 325. If the Imam mistakenly stands up for the fifth rak'ah and the follower stands up in accordance with him, the following is considered. If the Imam had sat down during the fourth rak'ah, the follower's prayer is invalidated by this standing. However, if the Imam has not sat down in the fourth rak'ah, the follower's prayer is not invalidated until he reaches prostration in the fifth rak'ah. 326. A follower may also join later. That is to say, if someone joins the Imam later and, due to sleep or a reason that invalidates wudu, is unable to perform some of the obligatory parts or rak'ahs with the Imam and misses them, they are both a latecomer and a follower. In this case, one first makes up the missed parts without recitation, then, if possible, follows the Imam in the remaining prayer. Afterwards, one makes up the rak'ahs missed before, following the Imam by reciting the Qur'an. It is also permissible to first make up these missed parts, and then make up the rukus or rak'ahs missed during the prayer. However, by doing so, one will not have observed the proper order, and therefore will be sinful